February 1983, quiet mountain town of Grande, Oregon. Winter nights are cold, still, and usually uneventful. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, where everyone knows everyone, and where violent crime is almost unheard of. But in the early morning hours of one winter day in 1983, something happened here that would haunt this town for decades. Tonight, we're diving into one of Eastern Oregon's most disturbing unsolved cases, the murder of Dana DuMars. This is Twisted Mysteries, and I'm your host, Justin Droke. Let's get into today's story. Grande, Oregon sits in the northeastern corner of the state, tucked into a valley surrounded by mountains. It's the kind of place where life moves a little slower. In the early 1980s, the town had around 12,000 residents. Logging, railroads, and farming drove the local economy. Most nights, if you wanted entertainment, you went to one of the handful of local dive bars. And that's exactly where 21-year-old Dana DuMars spent many of her evenings. Dana worked as a bartender at a local bar called My Wife's Place. She was known as friendly, outgoing, the type of person who made regulars feel welcome the moment they walked through the door. Like many people in small towns, Dana knew most of the people she served drinks to, and many of them knew her, which is why what happened next shocked the entire community. It was a typical night at the bar. Drinks were flowing, music was playing, and the usual group of locals had gathered to unwind. Among the people there that night was a man named Bart Cochran. Witnesses later said there had been tension in the bar. Bart had been arguing with another woman at the bar that night. There were raised voices, threats of violence, and this really wasn't unusual for a late-night drinking crowd, but several people would later say they remembered Cochran making some of these threats of violence earlier the evening. But still, when the bar closed that night, nobody could have imagined what was about to happen. Around 3 a.m, the crowd began to disperse. Some patrons went home, others moved to another bar for a final drink, and Dana, she finished her shift. She left the bar and stepped out into the cold night air. It would be the last time she was seen alive. After Dana left work around 3 a.m, something strange happened. For the next 3 hours, no one knows exactly where she was. This gap in the timeline has haunted investigators for decades. Did she go somewhere with someone? Did someone offer her a ride? Or did someone follow her after she left the bar? What we do know is that sometime before sunrise, Dana ended up at Candy Cane Park, a small playground located in a quiet residential neighborhood. It got its name from the red and white striped swing set that once was there. During the day, the park was full of children playing, but in the early morning hours and in the darkness, it would have been empty, silent, and isolated. Sometime in those early morning hours, Dana was attacked. The weapon? A hatchet. Investigators later determined that she had been struck 7 times. Most of the blows were aimed at her head. The brutality of the attack shocked even experienced investigators. Hatchet murders are extremely rare, and they are often deeply personal. This wasn't a distant attack. The killer had to be very close, face to face, within arm's reach. And yet, no one reported hearing screams. No one reported seeing a struggle, which suggests the attack may have happened very quickly, possibly in less than a minute. Now, obviously, a hatchet would be a very unlikely weapon to just carry around. It is far more likely that it was retrieved by a nearby home or a vehicle. Early that morning, someone near the park made a horrifying discovery. Dana DuMars was hunched over near the playground equipment. The passerby even rationalized that it was a jogger, possibly stopping to take a break, as Dana was slightly upright with her chin resting on her chest. It wasn't long before the blood alerted to a much more nefarious situation. Barely breathing, Dana was rushed for medical help, but the injuries were too severe. Dana later died at the hospital, and with her went the only person who truly knew what had happened in that park. Police quickly began searching for a suspect, and their attention soon focused on someone who had been at the bar that night, Bart Cochran, the only person interrogated by police. When investigators brought Cochran in for questioning, things took a really bizarre turn, to say the least. That interrogation would later become one of the most controversial parts of the case. According to records from the time, detectives used aggressive psychological tactics. First, the interrogating officer threw a card with Miranda rights written on it right into the trash. They suggested that Cochran had committed the crime, but blocked it from his memory. They told him he might have a special ability or magical powers to recall the event. And one officer tried to hypnotize Cochran into believing he had a gift and he could see events in his mind that he hadn't actually observed. He asked Cochran to lean back in his chair, relax, and close his eyes and imagine that he was watching a movie. By doing this, they would be able to retrieve information from Cochran's subconscious mind. This officer had no training in the use of hypnotic induction and had no business using it in an interrogation. At one point, officers even shined a black light on his hands and claimed it revealed invisible traces of blood. This was an attempt to convince Cochran that they had solid evidence that he had committed the crime. Eventually, after 7 consecutive hours of interrogation, Cochran did confess. He was arrested and he was tried in a court of law, and he was convicted of murder. For a moment, it looked like the case had been solved. Now, I do want to take some time and break down the interrogation a little bit more here. In 1983, when this case happened in Grande, police interrogations in the U.S. were heavily influenced by a method known as the Reed technique. And this method was widely taught and used across the entire country. The core idea? Investigators assume that the suspect is guilty and work to get a confession, not so much work to get the truth. Common tactics used at the time often included exaggerating evidence or creating fear of the consequence if you don't confess. They may even downplay or minimize the crime, leading the suspect to believe that he would be free to go if he or she admits and claims it was just an accident. This offers the suspect a psychological out. And this technique also relied on making claims of false evidence, telling the suspect that there are fingerprints, witnesses, or forensic proof that they did it, even if it's not real. These interrogations also lasted for hours, creating extreme pressure and fatigue and isolation. In the interrogation of Bart Cochran, several things reportedly happened that today would raise major red flags. And this matters because confessions like this can become false confessions. And false confessions are way more common than people think. Since the 1980s, research has drastically changed how we understand interrogations. Studies in psychology and wrongful convictions have shown people can be convinced they committed crimes they didn't actually commit, especially under stress, sleep deprivation, pressure from authority, and repeated suggestion. If the wrong person is focused on too early, evidence gets interpreted incorrectly, witnesses get influenced, and timelines get distorted. So going back to our case, only 3 years after Bart Cochran's conviction, he would be released from prison. His confession was thrown out by an appellate court, and with no other evidence other than that confession, the district attorney decided not to retry the case. Not because it proved he was innocent, but because the way it was obtained could no longer be trusted. And without that confession, the entire case fell apart. Which raises a disturbing question. If the confession wasn't real, then who were the police not looking at? The interrogation didn't just fail, it may have permanently damaged this case. The biggest mistake may not have been what investigators missed, but what they thought they had already found. Even worse than the mishandled interrogation, the crime scene itself had also been completely mishandled. Officers reportedly touched the hatchet without gloves, standard practice even in the 80s, passing it around amongst themselves, potentially destroying fingerprints or biological evidence. Bart Cochran was and is a free man, and the murder of Dana DuMars returned to being an unsolved case. For many years afterward, the murder has cast a shadow over Grande. Parents warn their children not to go near Candy Cane Park at night. Rumors begin to circulate about who might have been responsible. Some even believed Cochran was still guilty, despite the overturned conviction. Others believed the real killer had never even been investigated. And like many small towns, people suspected that someone out there knew the truth. Decades later, investigator Mike Harris was hired by District Attorney Kelsey McDaniels, who reopened this case. Harris was hired with federal grant funding in 2023, dove headfirst into attempting to find answers in this 40-year-old case. A misplaced box of evidence had been sitting in storage. Inside were items that had never been tested using modern forensic technology. Dana's clothing, including Dana's shoes stored in her brown paper bag, her earmuffs, and the maroon pantyhose she had been wearing when she was attacked. Fingernail clippings were also in the box, along with a rape kit. 2 hatchets were collected near the crime scene. One has been determined to have been used in the attack. Today, advances in DNA testing and forensic genealogy have solved crimes far older than this one, which means the murder of Dana DuMars may still be solvable. Investigator Harris had read more than 8,000 pages of documentation, including police reports, journal entries, and newspaper clippings. He learned that on the night of the killing, the person Bart had been arguing with was a woman named Patty Stroud, who had passed away at the age of 67 in the year 2018. According to an interview with Mr. Harris, the New York Times reported that Patty Stroud and Dana DuMars had a turbulent past before the murder. Furthermore, Dana's ex-boyfriend also had a violent past and was present at the bar that night. He had even threatened Dana in the past, even claiming that he would kill her. After only a few years, Harris learned that the federal grant funding that had hired him would be cut, and he would be transferred to another position. This was after he had narrowed his sights on 2 other potential suspects and had sent off fingernail clippings for DNA testing. Those results are still pending to this day. As of now, Harris and District Attorney McDaniels are pursuing other grant opportunities and will hopefully have the ability to continue to pursue justice for Dana DuMars and her family. Somewhere out there, the answer may still exist, waiting inside of a piece of evidence or inside the memory of someone who has stayed silent for more than 40 years. Before we end tonight's episode, there's one more part of this story. It's not part of the official investigation. It's not something you'll find in police reports, but if you talk to longtime residents of Grande, you'll hear it mentioned again and again. The ghost story of Candy Cane Park. For years after the murder of Dana DuMars, parents in town warned their kids not to go near the park after dark. Part of that was fear. A brutal crime had happened there. But over time, the warnings started to take on a different tone. People began telling strange stories about the playground at night. Some said they heard the swings moving when there was no wind. Others claimed they heard footsteps on the gravel paths, even when the park was empty. A few people even said they felt like someone was watching them if they walked through the park late at night. And then there's the story locals tell about the old merry-go-round. Years after the murder, some people claimed they heard it spinning slowly in the dark. Metal creaking, chains rattling, even when no one was there. Eventually, the merry-go-round was removed. Officially, it was just an aging piece of playground equipment. But in town, some people quietly said something else. They said Candy Cane Park never quite felt the same after Dana died there. Now, whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is one thing that's absolutely true. A young woman lost her life in that park, and for more than 40 years, her killer has never been identified. So maybe the real thing haunting Candy Cane Park isn't a ghost at all. Maybe it's the unanswered question that still lingers in this town. Who killed Dana DuMars? And will the truth ever finally come to light? Until then, the mystery of Candy Cane Park remains unsolved. That's our story for today. I really hope that shining a light on this cold case can help find justice and peace for Dana and her family. I did not know much about this case before I had begun investigating it, despite my close proximity to Grande and Candy Cane Park. My children play soccer at this park. I attended the university across the street from this park. This story hits close to home, literally, for me. I often have heard the nickname given to Candy Cane Park. A lot of locals refer to it as Hatchet Park. This is a little disturbing since I do watch my children play sports at this park. It seems a little too morbid even for me to refer to it in that way. But now I kind of understand why. It is something that locals here just cannot let go. It is something that lingers in the background, and I think it will continue to be at the forefront of one of Eastern Oregon's biggest mysteries until there is someone arrested and someone convicted for this crime. And I do agree with Mr. Harris that this is a solvable case and it can bring closure closure, whatever that means for the family that Dana left behind. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that I have a lot of local friends out there that really enjoy listening to some of the historical lore and the true crime located in our area. So this one is for you. For episode photos and video links, please check out my Instagram at twisted.mysteries. Please hit the like or follow button wherever you get this podcast. And also share this podcast with anyone you know who also loves all things twisted and mysterious. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me at Twisted Mysteries 26. I would also like to mention that sometimes in many of my episodes, I may use pseudonyms to protect the people involved, and some of the events may be embellished or dramatized just a little bit for entertainment purposes. Case sources include the New York Times for photographs and the most recent updates in the case, seattletimes.com, boiseghost.org, opb.org, newser.com, Justia Law, the state v. Cochran, findagrave.com. Thank you again for supporting this podcast. Until next time, stay twisted.